right, welcome. And today I have got the absolute pleasure of having Nava with me. And Nava, so that I don't mispronounce your name or misrepresent what you do and who you work for, please, why don't you take 60 seconds to give everyone just a bit of introduction of who you are and what your experiences have been.
Hi, friends. Navah Hopkins. I'm the brand evangelist at Optimizer. I've been in digital marketing since 2008. I started off in SEO, transitioned to PPC in 2012. I have spent the predominant, we'll call it 10 of that almost 20 years experience working in SaaS. And I've also worked in-house. I've worked in agencies. And my marching orders are be ethical and enable honorable profit and glorious victory for everyone in the ways that they define it.
Amazing. Well, that's actually a really, really good lead into what we want to be talking about. We're going to go through a couple of different topics, but the first thing we're going to be talking about is just the whole thing of competitors bidding on your branded terms. So let's firstly talk about, it'd be great to hear your, an explanation of some of the reasons that you have for why competitors bid on your branded and or high intent search terms.
So it's really important to identify when a competitor is actively versus unintentionally or passively bidding on your terms. By the nature of close variance, by the nature of match types, by the nature of performance max, and we'll talk about all of those in depth, don't worry. It is very easy for a competitor to accidentally be bidding on your terms. So we'd have to take some of that and put it in that bucket over there, and we'll talk about that. But for the intentional reasons why folks will bid on competitors, there's the politician play where you bid on sniping to grab your competitors' leads looking to cancel, where they're looking to look at reviews, whether you're spammy or scammy, and the keywords might be kind of going for the jugular, but the ads that they're going to put up there are the kissing baby, the very nice, very mellow. There's also going to be comparison, so they might put themselves in a direct head-to-head comparison and looking to see how they do against you, and there might be some actually really useful content there. So sometimes it's actually nice to see which competitors will make the active content investment to compare themselves to you to see what features that you've developed that they think they're a competitor for. So you can almost make that as content ideas for yourself. And then finally, there's just people being toxic people who just love nothing more than to just aggressively go after someone and drive up their cost of clicks. Thankfully, that third bucket is super small. Most people have a very practical, pragmatic reason why they will intentionally go after branded terms. Now, for non-branded terms where it's high intent, this is where we live in an open market. No one has copyright trademarks on those high intent terms. If you're going after a fairly simple way of talking about your product or service, odds are you're going to have competitors. If you start to shift into some of those more low search volume ways of searching, you can get some really good discounts and you can avoid your competitors, but you're probably going to have low search volume. So you kind of need to balance how much are you afraid of going head to head with competitors and what tools you're prepared to bring to bear to mitigate that, versus do you want to just avoid competition altogether and think about creative channels to go down, creative ways of searching, things like that.
Well, let's firstly just break down a couple of things there, because you've given a lot of amazing information. But I'd like to firstly just sort of flesh out. I think the first thing when you said the three different types, I do agree that by far the largest area would be unintentional. And I think a lot of it has come down just purely by the changes to match types, performance max, where other companies just don't know it's happening.
Correct.
But it's coming through. So in terms of that way, I mean, do you have any, strategies or things that you kind of recommend to firstly find it and then secondly fight against it? Hello there, and I hope you're enjoying my latest interview. I just wanted to quickly let you know that all of these interviews are sponsored by my paid Google Ads community, which is called the Google Ads Mastery Community. I set this community up for one clear purpose, and that is so that I could provide people with direct Google Ads support, and we do this in three main ways. Firstly, we run weekly live calls, and these are live calls that are run in all different time zones so that we can get the support to you, and it's where you can actually ask myself and also highly skilled members of my Define Digital Academy team direct questions about your Google Ads campaigns. We then also run monthly masterclasses, and these are in-depth teachings for what you need for success with Google Ads. And they don't only cover things inside the Google Ads dashboard, we also cover a specific training around things like offline conversions and how to increase the performance of your landing pages. All the important things you need for true success with Google Ads. And above all else, we've got our Google Ads community feed. And this is where you can join well over 300 other like-minded professionals like you. And we've got Google Ads specialists, agency owners, and also direct business owners who are there supporting and helping each other with how to see the best success with Google Ads throughout the year. And the best thing about this community is that it's all at a really low price because you can get full access for less than the price of a cup of coffee every day. And that's why I set up this community, is so that you can get tailored Google Ads support for a very low price. Right now, we're going to get right back into the interview, but if you'd like to find out more information about how you could join and plus also get a lifetime discount to join my Google Ads Mastery community, just follow the link in the description below.
Yeah, so one of my favorite ways to check is, of all things, to actually check your search terms for your non-branded campaigns and see which competitors naturally come up as the search terms for your non-branded queries, because that will tell you that Google thinks that competitor is a competitor for you and or is a good solution for that product or service. Of course, checking your branded is also a really good thing to do, and that will be the most obvious, but I actually prefer checking the non-branded campaign search terms first. Because that will give you the biggest clues of who Google understands to be your competitor versus who it's just happening willy-nilly. The other thing that's really helpful is under auction insights, you can see the overlap rate. So how often for the same query you both are showing up. You can see whether the competitor is serving above you more often than not. Now, what's really interesting, I have found, especially for local services, that if the impression share of your competitor is less than 10%, and usually these guys are going to be less than 10%, it's not intentional. Like you don't need to go to war with this brand. It's just, you're probably showing up on their auction insights report. They're showing up on yours. It's kind of the cost of doing business. Write compelling ads, be wonderful, win the business. But for anyone that's above, say, 20%, that's where it starts being a little bit more intentional. And so for those folks, you can start to actually weave into your creative, hey, get the real fill in the blank service, or turn to the trusted fill in the blank product. Whatever you want. And something I'll actually do for really high CPC or high cost per click industries is I'll actually outright say in the ad, I want to save 20%, scroll and click our organic listing. Now, sometimes the ad will get flagged and get disapproved. Sometimes it won't. The reason I'm making this suggestion is because it's not officially breaking the rules to do this, but sometimes Google will say, if you say to click, it can be incorrect. So you just want to be careful how you phrase the ad. But telling people to engage with your organic listing, it's not in any way breaking the rules. So for any competitors that are starting to really creep onto your search result page, you actually might want to start turning your ads into organic fuel. Where the goal isn't to get them to click on your ad because you're paying an increased price because the competitors are there. You instead want to direct them to that organic link. And by the way, you should tell your organic team, your SEO team, that you're doing this, because they don't want to start taking credit for all of these queries that you're actually helping to augment. It definitely wants to be a partnership.
Another thing that I always do, if you do really recommend, is in ad copy, is especially if you're seeing some high competitor markets, is get away from generic terms and say something that your competitors can't say. So rather than, perfect example of this, we had a e-commerce brand. They were a baby earmuff. They were first to the market, and they had a whole heap of imitations start coming in the market. And his main point of difference was he was the only brand that actually had met both the US and European safety standards for hearing. So that's what we started marking in there. So rather than just saying we're the best, it would actually go the only earmuffs, baby earmuffs. And because that was so powerful, because obviously parents were buying this, they didn't really care about the cheapness of the product. It was more about the safety of the product because it's got to do with their baby's hearing. So that's what I always look to go to too, is if you've got something that you can say that you know your competitors can't say, that's going to be more powerful as well.
And there's another, I should have mentioned this at the start, there's another type of competitor, which is, and say you're a franchise and you're working with corporate or you're a reseller. Sometimes corporate will have a very firm list of terms that you're not allowed to go after. And they could be the most important terms, the name of the product or service. So sometimes you need to get very creative in terms of how you talk about the product or service and how you potentially localize for yourself and distinguish yourself from corporate and vice versa. On corporate, you don't want your franchisees, you don't want your resellers cannibalizing your business, the business that you want to own, you should own. Set those rules. It is 100% within your purview to say, reseller, you can bid on whatever you want, save for these terms. And if I catch you with these terms, it's a fine, or we revoke trademark rights for your ad accounts, then they can't advertise at all. Like, there's a number of penalties that you absolutely can impose as a franchise owner in working with resellers. So definitely make sure that when you get into those sorts of agreements to be a reseller or to work with franchisees, ask the questions, what sort of lines are drawn in marketing? And also ask the question of, am I allowed to just put budget into an overall corporate account, or do I have to own my own marketing? Because it is very easy for you to be a competitor of yourself just by accident. And you want to make sure that you go in eyes open about what those terms are.
And especially too, I would also say, just on top of that, is just be mindful as well, especially with Google moving to, you're better off doing that by a negative keyword list, not only just a keyword targeting, because with the Google now targeting, obviously it's been for quite a number of years now, targeting the meaning of the word, not the actual keywords. Like, we've even seen in some industries, like say for example, motor insurance here in Australia, where Google actually assigns brand names as the meaning of motor insurance. So it's just something to keep in mind there too, that it is the meaning. Some of the larger niches, you can actually get larger competitors' names on an actual non-branded term. It's purely because of the meaning that Google's assigning.
And it's worth noting in Performance Max, there is that brand exclusion option, which is wonderful. You might need to add the brand in as a brand exclusion. So I actually had this happen with a client where there are very strict rules that the client is not allowed to come up at all for another brand. And if they do, there are fines associated. And so I had to add that term in as a net new company for Google. And there was an approval process. So kind of that checklist we go through when we're launching campaigns or starting a new initiative or starting a new account, build in the time to put in not only negative keyword lists, placement exclusions, things like that, but to actually add in those exclusions for Performance Max, because that is a campaign type that's not going away. And just for anyone that doesn't know, I know this is an advanced audience, Performance Max combines Google search, shopping, display, YouTube, local, Discover, I believe is still in there, as well as also with Gem. And it is a lovely bias-free way of allocating budget. It is not designed to be the standalone campaign type. And with the new announcement that Google is bringing, how they matched you, whether it was keyword list targeting or the search themes that you added in, you get up to, I believe it started off at 25, and I think they're upping it to 50 search themes now. I'll need to check. It's either 25 or 50 that you can use for search themes. You just want to make sure that you're auditing that report, because that report, if you see a higher match rate of your search themes versus keyword list matching than your other search terms to what actually gets matched out in search terms for your traditional search campaigns, you may decide that your more specific campaigns where you have stricter rules about how you engage with competitors needs to go to PMax, and vice versa. If you see that the keyword list targeting tends to take precedence in PMax, you'll probably want your stricter rules enforced by standalone search, standalone display, standalone YouTube, so on and so forth.
And I guess this is probably where we can get to as well, is with all of this, whether it's PMax or I also use the terminology that you used before about like aggressive and defensive campaigns. So I would say you're aggressive. Sometimes you do have customers who actually even want to go out and start going on to other competitors. Is for me, I always just come back to is always just think about your structure and what you want to be using each campaign for. I see a lot of benefits for competitive marketplaces. I know a lot of brand owners don't like it, but having a branded search campaign, just so then you can at least control the costs, or you can actually see an extra 100%. Benefit of it and play it through that way. You're mentioning some things there with Performance Max. So one thing would be also too, I mean, have you got any insight or any, I guess, predictions on what's going to be happening with the Search Max keyword type coming into play this year?
So I'll admit, up until a few days ago, I thought Search Max was just something that everyone was blowing out of proportion. It was going to be a big nothing burger. But when Google actually took the time to spell out that this is going to be a combination of DSA and all match types, and I was thinking quite a bit about one of the stipulations that the DOJ put out, that Google would either need to share all search term data or collect and share none. That Search Max seems like the easiest way for them to keep search text ads without actually having to worry about it being true search text ads, because at that point match types just are completely gone. I don't know if it will still be, because I'm not going to make this political.
No.
Things are just interesting, and no one knows what's going to happen in the US with the Department of Justice and what's going to happen with Google and Chrome and search terms and AdSense. So my prediction would have been, say in October, that Search Max would replace bidding on broad or bidding on phrase or bidding on exact, and you would have Search Max and then you would have Performance Max. And that would be a way for Google to navigate any potential privacy compulsions by the DOJ. In today's world, I actually suspect that Search Max might not even make it to prime time and that everyone will get access to it, because the amount of work that they're putting into Performance Max for reporting, for control levers, it just doesn't make sense that they would do that and then have Search Max, which is essentially the same thing, because at that point, just do Performance Max. So we'll see.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I still think there'll be a need for a level of exact match targeting. And the reason why I think that is because I know, and I've worked with some really, so I look at, say, for example, the superannuation niche, insurance niches, even in Australia and Europe, where you get into the regulations around supplements or vitamins. There's a lot of industry-wide focuses that companies can't use Performance Max because they need to be able to control ad copy, even down to the point of they need to be able to control that if this is in headline 1, this has to appear in headline 2 in terms of the text.
Correct.
For any claims they're making. So I'm not on the camp that traditional search is going away. However, I do think that that's probably going to be a smaller subset of the market. It's the same reason why I think the demand gen, there'll still be video campaigns, because there are some very valid reasons and very big markets that Google would not want to lose the spend of, that they do need a level of control over who sees their ads and where their ads go.
I want to clarify, I 1000% agree there is a need for exact match. The question was, what do I think will happen?
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
So what do I think should happen versus what I think will happen are actually two different answers.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something about video that I think is worth talking about. Everyone that has shied away from video has deprived themselves of a super transactional, amazing search engine and discovery engine that's pennies to the dollar compared to search text ads. And Performance Max evolved to get people to just bias free start doing YouTube, start having placements on YouTube. Now, I think the way they went about it wasn't terribly clever, because if your brand's guidelines are you have to appear in a certain way, you have to have visuals render a certain way, and the AI doesn't do that, and we know that the Performance Max video ads are pretty bad that are automatically generated, that wasn't terribly clever. But the mandate of start thinking about video, not even just from a platforms are pushing it, but consumers more and more are looking to consume content through audio, through watching tutorials, things like that. They're not necessarily looking to search and read a whole big long wall of text.
Yeah.
And when we think about the future of search campaigns and even competitor campaigns, it's a lot easier to sell your message in a video where you speak as a human to another human than a little haiku text ad begging for attention in a wall of fairly similar creative.
Yeah.
So I think when we're thinking about competitors, one way to beat competitors is to be where they're not. And most people have not taken the leap into video. So if you can do video, you definitely should.
And I also think too, it's because we have a lot of this, in our industry, which I'm sure you're aware, there's the people who are still trying to hold on to the old way of going through Google Ads and search, and they're really anti anything but Performance Max, really anti anything, any type of new. I guess my view on it is that what they're missing fundamentally the way that people are going to be carrying out search is changing rapidly. And I see video being a lot more important, especially in the Google ecospace, is because, they may lose out on search, but obviously because they own YouTube, that's why they're wanting to go down this, because it would be, people are using more chatbots or whatever technology they want to do for search, voice search. Video is still a really, really big part. And it's a way that you can still engage with your potential audiences.
And I think just to kind of put a bow on video, because I know that we want to talk mostly about competitors and then kind of where things are heading. There is more to video than just a 30-second not skippable ad. So yes, 100%, the 30 to 90 second skippable ads are a steal. You get your message out, they skip, you don't pay, you still have started to kind of getting into their awareness. But when you start looking at the 15 or 30-second non-skippables, or you even look at the bumper ads that are 6 seconds, there is some really impactful things you can do with video.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was actually very interesting is that when video action campaigns got rolled into demand gen, a lot of e-commerce folks were very upset because that was an amazing format. It drove incredible ROAS. I'm not going to plug Optimizer too much on this, but I do want to point folks to, we did a study looking at different ad creative, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised how much demand gen actually drove return on ad spend.
Yeah.
And people were actually able to make profit off of what should be top of funnel or introducing and educating, not actually getting the sale. So the more that you can start to test with video now, the better off you'll be. Because I think in 2026, we are going to be having a conversation about turning off our search text ads to just run video, because that's where everyone is.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I got to get on video. This is, I think, one of the final years folks have to just do it. Yeah. Because every other ad platform is really leaning into video as well. It's not like it's just a Google thing. Amazon is doing it. Meta is doing it. Microsoft is doing it.
And the other thing I would say there too is that people who are starting to dabble or starting to invest in video is, I'm always really big too, is not just looking at the individual campaign live, the success of the of the account. Like I've got a lot of examples. Like people are still in terms of something like a display ad format, we're still using a lot of display ads, but we don't count the success of it just by what we're seeing in that line. So things like view through conversions, and even just looking at the total success of the account before you started video and after you started video are the things that we're looking at as well.
The main thing for attribution and thinking about video in the funnel, I don't know that we can think about reporting the way we have in years past, because privacy makes it so that we don't have full reporting anyway. But that's not to say that we can't have some accountability. So Google has 2 different really useful AI models for tracking conversions and for helping to model that out. One is on a 7-day period, one is on a 21-day period.
Yeah.
And the more that you can feed in data of what happened, the better you will be understanding if video was responsible for empowering the sale or not. The better you'll understand if the messaging is going to the right groups of people, things like that. But I think the question of attribution isn't just a video one. It's for everybody. Unless I totally misunderstood the question.
No. It'd be interesting. So do you want to just sort of break that down a little bit? So just to explain to some people some of the options that are there for attribution and how what your recommendations would be around that.
Sure. So with Google, you effectively have two types. There's data-driven attribution, which is the default. And then you have last click, which no one should be on. It's still technically there, but don't be on it. And then beyond the data-driven attribution, which will have that fractional conversion action associated based off of multiple different factors, how Google assigns value to each step in the journey, you'll also be able to start to feed in those offline conversions, provided that you, again, have gone through consent mode and you've verified yourself and you have all those cookie permissions in place. So I'm not going to try to remember off the top of my head the two names of the AI systems, but I'll break them down. I'll send you offline the link to them.
And we'll put it in the description as well, of the video.
One is lead gen oriented, which has a 21-day look back window that can understand and put back the conversions based off of what you upload. Now, some people will say 21 days isn't enough. 21 days is nothing in lead gen. How on earth is that useful? 21 days is still useful to know if someone completed a trial or not. 21 days is still useful to understand if someone booked a call with the sales team and showed or no showed. You can still feed something approaching information. And especially if you start putting in micro conversion sort of conversion values to go with each step in the journey, it actually can be very, very powerful because the ad platforms do tend to do better when they interact with conversion values instead of just net conversions. Now, when we are thinking about e-commerce, it has a really lovely 7-day look back window. And part of the reason that AI modeling is a 7-day is because e-commerce purchases tend to be faster, but also the input systems tend to be more continuous, especially through the API connection through like a Shopify or WooCommerce, BigCommerce. It's much easier for Google to have that 7-day rule instead of the 21-day rule. So the reason I'm kind of getting into the weeds here is very tempting to look at a campaign and the results for today or yesterday and be really upset that it didn't do anything, when in fact, you probably need to give it 7, 14, even 21 days to really see the results. And so the fact that those are the look back windows that Google is using in their AI modeling for conversions gives you really good clues into how its systems process information and adapt. I'll also throw a plug for conversion exclusions in here as well. I think it's a very common mistake that people make, that they will test lots of different things. They'll test lots of different conversion types, and then they leave everything. And so Google is like, I got no idea what to do with this. Like there's too much. So data exclusions, in case you're not aware, it's under the tools section in bidding and budgets, and it's to make exclusions or adjustments. And you can do it for seasonality too, but the exclusions will let you actually tell Google here, during this period of time, the conversion tracking was messed up. Just ignore it. Don't look at it. It's not worth factoring in. And what that will do is it will help Google understand that period where you had, say, 50 conversions, where you actually only really had 5, but page views or something tagged as a conversion. Don't assume that cost per acquisition is a correct cost per acquisition. Don't assume that conversion volume is actually a reasonable conversion volume for your campaigns. So it won't then push budget to parts of your account that shouldn't get access to budget. And bringing it back to like the original topic of competitors, this is really important here too, because competitor terms, much like branded terms, typically have much lower cost per clicks than your non-branded traffic. And so if Google is accidentally driving a whole bunch of traffic to competitor queries because that's getting people to click your ad and they land on the page where they don't actually get in touch with you. You don't want that. Like, that's not a good use of your budget. So that's why it's really important to audit your conversion tracking. If you need to do exclusions, do those, and just be mindful about how long it takes for Google to reset itself.
And you're exactly right. And I mean, my biggest thing to anyone at the moment is that your data points, what you're feeding back into Google, is really probably, I would even argue to say, the most important thing, to make sure that you're getting good data points back so that you can then feeding the right information to Google so that it can make because you're not going to be able to stop the automation, but you've got to be able to feed the right data in. So it's getting the right baseline data so it knows what to target more, what you don't want, and what you do want. While we're down on this topic as well, let's now talk about, just in your role, obviously, with the brand evangelist for Optimizer, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen, or the biggest data point changes? There's probably a couple of things we could talk about. So let's go down the data avenue, I think, because I think
Okay.
you'd be able to play better there. Have there been any sort of big, I guess, data changes that you've noticed since the increase of, Performance Max, increase of automation since, 22, 23, that people should be aware of, that it should be changing the way that you approach Google Ads? I know that's a very, very broad question, and I hope you've got what I've got there.
All right. For everything I don't cover, I will link to our wonderful blog page where you can read all of the lovely studies that the amazing Optimizer data team puts together, and that I'll help evangelize and amplify. Shameless plug, Optimizer has over $5 billion in ad revenue that runs through our system. So we are in a very privileged position to be able to look at a lot of different trends. And because we provide essentially PPC insurance through automation layering, we're able to help you manage your Google, your Microsoft, your Amazon, your Meta, soon to be LinkedIn. So we help you with a lot. Shameless plugs out of the way. One of the things that I found incredibly depressing, really depressing, is that the majority of advertisers in our PMax study had more than 50% of their budget going to PMax in an audience cohort that had only 30% e-commerce advertisers. So why that was depressing to me is that I hear a lot of people complain about Performance Max, but then they make the choice to put a lot of budget into Performance Max, and at the same time don't actually use the exclusions at their disposal. So I don't know how many people are aware. There was a form that would let you exclude placements at the account level, exclude negatives at the campaign level before the beta got rolled out to everyone to do it in the UI. There were a number of things that were available to advertisers to take the bull by the horns and fix it. So the fact that we had a lot of Performance Max usage and not a lot of safeguards put in place was interesting. What I also found really fascinating is that the performance was essentially flat between those that used exclusions and those that didn't. So that was a really good argument in the case of Google that, hey, you know what, Google's actually not so bad at protecting from brand cannibalization, that they're really good at understanding what's useful, so on and so forth. Now, on budget allocation in Performance Max, that's a slightly different story. The healthiest budget allocation for Performance Max seemed to be somewhere around between 10 to 20% of the budget going to Performance Max, and the rest being search or shopping or display, like running other campaign types. And I found that really fascinating because Google was telling us the truth. Google said you should not use Performance Max on its own. Performance Max should be layered on top. And then the data played out that yes, in fact, when it's used as a bias-free, wild and crazy, kind of find that incremental value, Performance Max does great. When you try to make it be everything, it struggles. So that was really fascinating. The other thing that was really interesting on Performance Max is that no one could really decide how they wanted to structure their Performance Max campaigns. So we had effectively equal groups between our multiple campaign, single asset group, multiple campaigns, multiple asset groups, single campaign, single asset group, and single campaign, multiple asset groups. But performance-wise, having multiple campaigns with a single asset group far and away was the best performance. It is worth, again, noting this is in a predominantly lead gen oriented cohort. E-commerce has different rules of engagement, but even still, and especially now that shopping campaigns and Performance Max campaigns enter the auction equally, all that really decides who's bidding more. I found it really fascinating that advertisers are still testing all these different styles, and no one kind of raised their hand and said, hey, it seems like single asset group with multiple campaigns seems to be the way to go. So that was kind of a really interesting insight.
The one thing I want to ask about that, did you look at the data points in terms of the website setup? So what I mean by that is that the campaigns that performed best was separate Performance Max campaigns with one asset group, but was that going to a website that had a really good segmentation around different services, because you were saying this is in the service space? So they had a good menu structure where they could go here, and then did they, in the separate campaigns, did they have exclusions saying, so don't go to this part of the website, just go to this part of the website?
So disclaimer, we did not factor individual landing pages into the analysis, in large part due to the fact that there were 9,199 accounts in the cohort. So going through 9,199 websites
Yeah.
It would have been a lot. I think actually in today's world with AI agents, we might be able to look at it. Like I'll talk with Fred and see if we can use some of our GPT budget to look at the actual websites and analyze the websites that we, anyway.
For me, it would more be about the structure, not the actual page. It would more be about the menu structure as to whether they had if they had a very, very clear menu structure that then allowed them to do the...
I fully agree with what you're saying. My 2 cents on this is because so few people used exclusions, I don't know that it's fair to say that that amount of intelligent effort was applied in that case. Okay. Now, when we run the data again, because these are the sorts of studies that we like running annually to kind of see how are things changing, are people using different tactics? Of course, we'll take a look. And that's a good add-on to add in menu structure, because I agree that from an SEO standpoint, that is a very powerful enhancement to Performance Max. But again, one of my struggles in 2024 was dealing with how lazy and how loud people were complaining. And I think if 2025 is a shift and is growth, it's that people feel empowered to take action, and they feel empowered to, instead of screaming loudly into the void, they actually say, okay, I find this problematic. I'm going to go take action.
Yeah.
And go do those actions. So the action items that came out of the Performance Max study were that it seems like there is ROI on time by dividing your campaigns into multiple campaign single asset groups, if you can do that with your account structure. If you can't, that's totally understandable. You can experiment. The other major action item that came out was that search themes and audience signals didn't really seem to be worth the effort to apply, which I found very frustrating, because that was what I was counting on being the golden hero lever moment. Like, this is our main way to talk to the system. So when Google released the search theme usefulness tool for the beta, that one was actually my favorite thing that they announced, because that's a way for us to understand, are we picking the right search themes? Yeah. Because my suspicion is that was a case of human error, because the way search themes work, if you have an exact match keyword and it exactly matches the query that the user is searching, that will win every single time. There is no world in which the exact match keyword will not serve before Performance Max.
Yeah.
But Performance Max has the chance to snipe placements in the auction ahead of every other match type.
Yeah.
So what my suspicion is that a lot of people were using the same exact keywords that they had on an exact match in Performance Max. And so like Performance Max was never going to have the chance to shine on their search themes. And so it was only going to be the keyword list targeting. And so that's why you ended up with such weird performance or negligible impact on search themes being present. I'll be interested to see in some of the more anecdotal data where we actually look at the individual accounts and what's being done, if that plays out again this year with all of these changes that Google is bringing.
Yeah. And I think the big thing you sort of touched on, the big thing with me with Performance Max is I'm always really, really clear with anyone we're talking to about Performance Max is understanding what it really plays best in. And the thing for me about success in Google Ads as we're moving forward, it's more the core understanding how each campaign works and then how to put them all together. And that's really, I think, where success is coming in. The accounts that we're seeing are going really, really well is they have a really clear idea on why they've got their search campaigns to set up the way they have, why they've got the Performance Max campaigns to set. Whenever we're auditing an account and I'm talking to them and they don't really know, they go, we're just trying Performance Max and there's no exclusions. That's where it always runs into trouble for me. So that's where, so it's interesting to hear that data. I'll have to have a look at the performance of my Performance Max accounts to see if there is any difference between multiple campaigns or all-in-one campaigns. So that we'll go through and have a look at it. The only thing we'd have to think about is the way that we roll out Performance Max is we also very much use Performance Max for bidding for new customers. So we will look to own high intent traffic, branded traffic, competitor traffic in search and or shopping. And we segment out our Performance Max layering on top to go for new customers. So we've got only bidding on new customers, brand exclusions, campaign specific goals, so that it's it functions out that way. But no, it's definitely, you've given me some homework to have a look at.
The other interesting data point, and this was in our ad copy study, is that title casing, which we all default to, underperforms sentence casing, which I find mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But I have a suspicion as to why that is. We have seen a rise in forums just really taking hold in the search result page. And those are much more trusted than corporate websites that very polished, buttoned up. And so users like the human effect of a sentence versus title casing. So that's been a test that I started to run, and I've actually seen some pretty decent results.
Okay.
Even if the click-through rate is marginally lower, the conversion rate is actually miles better. And so that's a test I would highly encourage everyone to run, is see how you do on, say, a B-level product or a B-level service. So not your best, but mid-tier. Experiment running with sentence-cased ads and just find out, do you get better click-through rates? Do you get better conversion rates? Do you get worse everything? Is it essentially the same? Because if it's essentially the same, it actually works out better for you, because then your ad stands out amidst all those title-cased ads that just look the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that would be the other thing you'd always come back to. I'm always big thing when you are writing your ad copies, have a look at what your competitor's doing, because you just want to be able to do it. See how you can stand out. How can you say things differently? So, hey, it has been, I am going to give you a chance for final comments, but it's been absolutely amazing having you here. I'm going to pass it over to Nava just to give her any recommendations or anything she sees fit. If you do want to get in contact with Nava, I'm going to put all of her details in the description of this video and podcast. But yeah, I'll hand over to Nava. Do you have any last comments or anything before we finish up for the day?
Well, first, this has been a delight. It's very rare that I get to have a really lovely, amazing conversation as opposed to just talking.
Yeah.
So I'm happy, because this is like a really fun conversation. So a couple of things. Number one, give yourself grace. This is a crazy time to be in PPC. And we live in the unfortunate timeline that AI is coming to a head at the exact same time as privacy is coming to a head. And so the data we need for AI is now being obscured. So all that is to say, give yourself grace. Do not beat yourself up if things you're testing go sideways, or if reporting isn't quite how you imagine. Again, give yourself grace. I love helping folks. I participate on the Ask the Journal PPC once a month. I do also a quarterly column for Search Engine Land. You can check out Optimizer's PPC Town Hall and the Masterclass Automation. But yeah, really just give yourself grace.
Yeah.
I know that seems really cliche, but that's my biggest advice.
Yeah. No, and it's the same thing I go, is that keep going. You want to be really looking at, everyone has bad weeks and sometimes even bad months in campaign performance, but look at the long term, and obviously, just keep going. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight having you here. And we look forward to sharing this with everyone. Thank you.
Cheers, Aaron. Bye.